I never thought it would happen to me. Not to Grace. Not with Luca. Especially not with Luca. We were fine. Or so I thought. I was working long hours, buried in spreadsheets and meetings, when Grace called one Tuesday afternoon to tell me she was meeting friends for coffee. I was relieved, honestly. I needed some space. I hadn't realized how much I was craving it until she left. Grace and I were good, or at least, I thought we were. No major issues, no fights. But there was something off lately. A small gap, invisible at first but growing. It was subtle, like the slow drip of water wearing away stone. Just a quick coffee, she said. Don't wait up. I nodded, and she was gone. Hours later, I got a text. Hey, I might be a little late. Staying to chat with Luca. Don't wait up. Luca. He was the manager of the cafe they liked. A decent guy, friendly, never crossed any lines. The kind of person you'd never suspect. At least, that's what I told myself. No reason to worry. He was just a guy she knew. But even as the night wore on, that text kept nagging at me. The way she said, Luca, like it meant something more. Maybe it was nothing, but I couldn't shake the feeling. I convinced myself I was being paranoid. Grace and I weren't the jealous types. Then, the next morning, her message came through. Sorry I stayed out so late last night. Hope you weren't worried. I was with Luca, just talking. The timing was all wrong. It was 2 a.m. when she sent it. Grace had never stayed out that late without a heads up. I knew her well enough to know that wasn't normal. Still, I told myself it was nothing. She was just catching up with a friend. But deep down, something felt off. And the more I thought about it, the more uneasy I became. It wasn't the late text that bothered me. Not entirely. It was the silence after that. Grace, who had always been open about everything, became oddly distant. The small, casual chats we used to have, the ones that had filled our evenings with laughter, turned into brief exchanges, as if she was trying to avoid certain topics. It didn't make sense. She'd always been the kind of person who'd come home and spill her day, talk about everything, no matter how trivial. But now, nothing. Days went by, and I told myself it was just a phase. She was busy, I was busy. We had our own worlds, and sometimes that distance was natural. People change, don't they? Maybe she was just going through something I couldn't see. I didn't press her. I didn't want to be the guy who started overanalyzing everything. But then came the second text. Luca's going to grab coffee later. Should be fun. It was strange. Why would she tell me that? Why did it matter? I tried to convince myself it didn't. But the more I thought about it, the more it didn't sit right. Why was she mentioning him so often? And why did I feel like she was trying to make sure I knew she was still seeing him? The next weekend, I decided to stop by the cafe myself, just to see what was going on. I'd been there dozens of times before, so it wasn't out of place. I figured I could just pop in, grab a coffee, say hi to Luca, and maybe talk to Grace for a few minutes. When I walked in, I saw her right away. She was sitting at a corner table with Luca. No one else. Just the two of them, chatting, laughing, too easily. I couldn't tell you what it was, something about their chemistry, the way they leaned in when they spoke, the way she smiled at him. It just wasn't the way she smiled at me. I tried to shake it off, but something inside me snapped. I stood at the counter, pretending to look at the pastries, but all I could do was watch them. Their conversation flowed, and I could see the easy camaraderie between them. Too easy. I felt like an outsider in my own life. But what could I do? What was I supposed to think? Luca caught my eye from across the room and gave me a small wave. I nodded back, but the feeling in my chest, the one that had started small, was now a tight knot I couldn't ignore. I ordered my coffee, trying to act normal, but I couldn't. Every second felt like I was being pulled into a web, and I didn't know if I could ever get out. It wasn't just the text messages anymore. It wasn't even the late nights. It was the way Grace started acting. There was a coolness to her I hadn't seen before. It wasn't overt, nothing you could pin down, but it was there. Little things. She'd leave her phone on the kitchen counter with the screen facing down, something she never did. And there was that odd hesitation when I asked about her day. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I had to know. That weekend, I decided to stop by the cafe. No big deal, just a quick visit. I told myself I was just going to grab coffee and maybe chat with Grace for a bit. When I walked in, she was sitting with Luca at a corner table. Alone. Just the two of them. I'd seen them together before. They were friendly, but this was different. The way they talked, how she smiled at him. It was too intimate. Too comfortable. There was a spark there I didn't recognize. One that didn't exist between us anymore. I stood at the counter, pretending to read the pastry display, but I couldn't look away. Luca caught my eye and waved. I nodded back, but I felt something cold creep into my gut. I wasn't supposed to feel like this, like I was watching something I wasn't supposed to see. But I couldn't help it. I couldn't ignore the way she leaned in to listen to him, the way he mirrored her movements. I grabbed my coffee, trying to act normal, but it felt like everything had shifted. The weight of it hit me as I walked out, and suddenly I realized how little I really knew. It wasn't just the cafe. It was everything. The more I saw Grace with Luca, the more I couldn't ignore it. Her texts became shorter, her answers more rehearsed. I started noticing the small changes. How she'd leave her phone on silent, or the way she looked at it when a message came through, like she was afraid I might see. I hated how I was becoming the paranoid husband, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The next Friday, I decided to confront it. Grace had texted earlier, saying she was meeting some friends. But when I drove past the cafe, her car was there. And Luca's. I parked a block away and waited. I wasn't proud of it, but the need to know gnawed at me. 20 minutes later, Grace walked out of the cafe. She was laughing, and Luca was right behind her, his hand resting too casually on her back. They stopped at the car, and I saw them exchange a quick kiss on the cheek. Something so simple, but everything in me screamed that it wasn't just casual anymore. I waited until they left, then followed them. They stopped at her place. Not his. Hers. I stayed in the car, watching from a distance, unable to move. They went inside together. I sat there for an hour, the weight of what I was seeing pressing on me, but I couldn't bring myself to walk up to the door to confront them. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. I didn't know if I was ready to hear the truth. But that night, I knew something had changed. I had crossed a line I couldn't come back from. The question that had been building in my head for weeks finally had a face, and it wasn't just a question anymore. It was a truth I wasn't ready for. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I couldn't. The silence between us was deafening. Grace acted like everything was fine, but I could feel the distance growing. The little things, her avoiding eye contact, leaving the room when I came home, told me otherwise. Then, I saw the text. She left her phone on the table, face up. Can't wait to see you tonight. Luca's name lingered in my mind, but I didn't need to see it. I already knew. I wasn't proud, but I picked up the phone. I read it. She was meeting him again. My stomach twisted. I hadn't wanted to believe it, but the weight of it settled in. There was no denying it now. I put the phone down quickly. My hands were shaking, and I sat there, frozen. I should have gone to work, left the house, but I stayed. I was stuck, paralyzed by something I couldn't yet name. Grace came in minutes later, all too calm. She didn't even look at the phone. I'm going out again, she said casually. Just with friends. I didn't ask who. I didn't need to. That night, I didn't sleep. I thought about everything. Our beginning, our promises, the laughter. It felt like I was losing her, but I couldn't admit it. I refused to face it, but I knew. The truth was already there, and it was only a matter of time before I had to confront it. The days blurred together after that. I couldn't stop thinking about the text. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't imagining things. Grace had never been distant like this before. The lies were small, but they built up, piece by piece. Every time she left the house, every time I saw her smile at her phone, it was like another crack in the wall between us. I started noticing things I hadn't before. The way she avoided certain topics, how her phone was always on silent, or how she'd lock it whenever I walked into the room. There was a coldness in the air that didn't belong. I kept telling myself I was overreacting, but I wasn't stupid. I wasn't blind. I could feel the shift. The tipping point came the following Saturday. Grace had a girls' night out. She'd said it was just dinner, drinks, nothing special. I didn't press it, but as she left, I found myself checking the time. She never came back when she said she would. It wasn't unusual for her to be out late, but that night, something felt different. At 3 a.m., I got a message from her. Sorry, stayed late. I'm with Luca. Don't wait up. Luca again. The knot in my stomach tightened. I didn't respond. I just stared at the screen, and for a moment, everything went silent. I wasn't sure if I was angry, hurt, or just numb. But I was certain of one thing. This wasn't just a friendship anymore. And I wasn't just being paranoid. The next morning, I decided to take a walk. I needed air. I needed space to think. As I walked down the street, I passed the cafe. I couldn't help myself. I went in. I found Grace there, sitting with Luca. Again, she was laughing at something he'd said. The way she looked at him, it was too familiar, too comfortable, something I hadn't seen in months. I stood by the counter, pretending to look at the menu. But I wasn't looking at the menu. I was watching them. I had to force myself to act normal. I ordered my coffee, my hand shaking, and as I turned to leave, I caught Luca's eye. He waved. I nodded back, but my chest felt like it was caving in. I couldn't let it go. I had to know. I should have left, should have walked away, but I didn't. I couldn't. The images of Grace and Luca, so comfortable with each other, kept playing in my mind. Every laugh, every glance, they weren't just friends. I knew that now, and that knowledge was eating me up inside. Later that afternoon, I told myself I wouldn't go back to the cafe. But I did. I drove there in a haze, parked down the street, and just sat in my car for a while. I needed to see it again, to confirm what I already knew. It was like I was searching for a sign that I could use to confront her. Something tangible. Something that would make this nightmare make sense. I saw Grace walk in, and a few minutes later, Luca followed. This time, they weren't sitting at a corner table. They were in the back, out of sight from the door. I stood outside, waiting, watching. I felt like an outsider in my own life. It wasn't until they came out nearly an hour later that I finally moved. They didn't notice me at first, but I noticed them. Grace was standing too close to him, her hand resting on his arm like it was the most natural thing in the world. She said something, and Lucas smiled. The kind of smile that felt too intimate for a friend. They stood by her car for a while, talking. I watched them from across the street, too far to hear, but close enough to see the way they moved. It wasn't a casual goodbye. They didn't just part ways. They lingered. And then Luca leaned in, and for a split second, I thought they were going to kiss. But no, they didn't. Not exactly. Instead, Grace kissed him on the cheek. It was a simple thing, but in that moment, it shattered me. She kissed him, and it wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an accident. There was intention behind it. A closeness that I couldn't deny anymore. I sat in my car for another half hour, replaying the scene in my mind. The finality of it hit me like a freight train. It wasn't just the little signs anymore. It was everything. I couldn't keep pretending I didn't see it. I couldn't stay in that car forever, could I? But I did. I stayed until the sky darkened and the streets grew quiet. Grace hadn't come back yet, and every minute felt like an hour. My mind was racing, replaying everything, trying to make sense of it. It wasn't just the kiss. It was everything that had led up to it. The distance between us, the texts, the late nights, and the way she'd been acting. I felt like I was suffocating in my own thoughts. When Grace finally came home, she acted like nothing was wrong. She walked in, set down her purse, and said, "Hey, I grabbed dinner on the way home. I hope you're not hungry." I wanted to scream at her, but I didn't. I just nodded, taking the dinner she'd brought, trying to swallow the lump in my throat. I couldn't even look at her. She sat down next to me, talking about her day. Her voice sounded so normal, so effortless, like everything was fine. But I knew. I knew what was happening, and it made me sick to my stomach. I barely ate. I just stared at my plate, waiting for the right moment to ask the questions I had been avoiding for weeks. I wanted to ask her about Luca. I wanted to ask her what was really going on, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. Not yet. Instead, I just listened to her talk, trying to ignore the growing pain in my chest. Later, as she went to bed, I stayed up. I kept thinking about everything I'd seen, everything I hadn't said. I couldn't shake the image of her with Luca, that intimate moment outside the cafe. It kept looping in my mind, like a broken record. I was exhausted, but sleep wouldn't come, and neither would the answers. I couldn't sleep that night. My mind was on a loop, replaying every moment, every glance, every small detail I'd overlooked until now. Grace's laughter with Luca, the way she touched his arm, the way they leaned in together. It wasn't just friendly. I knew that much, but I wasn't ready to confront it. Not yet. The next morning, nothing felt right. Grace was cheerful, like nothing had changed. She kissed me goodbye and left, but I couldn't stop watching her walk out the door. She seemed so unaffected, and that cut deeper than I expected. I stayed behind, lost in thought. The silence was too loud. The walls of our home felt like they were closing in. I had no more excuses, no more rationalizations. I knew the truth, but I wasn't ready to face it. I wasn't ready to face her. I spent the morning pretending I was fine, but I wasn't. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I had to know what was really going on, so I did something I never thought I'd do. I followed her. I waited a few hours, then drove to the cafe. I told myself I wasn't going to just watch. I wasn't going to stand by like some passive observer. I needed answers. When I walked in, Luca was behind the counter, as usual. Grace wasn't there yet. I stood at the counter, my mind racing. I wasn't sure what I was waiting for, her to walk in, to say something, to do something, but my gut was telling me something would happen. And then she walked in. She looked around, and when her eyes landed on Luca, her face softened. She didn't see me. Not yet. She moved toward him, and I couldn't tear my eyes away. The same easy chemistry, the same intimate connection that had been growing for weeks. They disappeared into the back, and I followed. Not physically, but with my eyes. I stayed out of sight, close enough to see but far enough to avoid being noticed. I was done pretending. I knew what was happening, but it didn't make it any easier. I couldn't stand the uncertainty anymore. I couldn't just sit in the dark and let it eat me alive. I had to face it. I waited, holding my breath, watching them. I kept myself hidden, staying just far enough back to not be noticed, but close enough to see everything. Grace and Luca were sitting in the same corner of the cafe, the same place I had seen them so many times before. This time, though, it wasn't the usual casual conversation. There was a tension in the air, a feeling that I couldn't shake. Grace laughed at something Luca said, her eyes sparkling in a way I hadn't seen in months. It wasn't the kind of laugh that we shared anymore. It wasn't the kind of laugh that was meant for someone you loved. It was the kind of laugh you give someone you're infatuated with. I felt my stomach twist. I was seeing it with my own eyes, but I couldn't bring myself to believe it. I stood frozen, watching them interact, unable to turn away. At one point, Luca leaned in a little too close, his hand brushing against hers. Grace didn't pull away. She didn't hesitate. And the way she looked at him, it was the same way she used to look at me when we were first together, when we couldn't get enough of each other. Something inside me snapped. I needed to know. I needed to confront her. But my feet wouldn't move. I stood there like an idiot, watching, waiting for something, anything, to tell me that this wasn't happening, that I was imagining it. But it wasn't in my head. It was real. I watched as they talked, their voices low, their bodies leaning in, almost touching. There was no denying the chemistry between them. I felt like I was suffocating. I couldn't tear my eyes away. I couldn't stop thinking about how many times Grace had told me she was just friends with Luca. How many times she had reassured me that there was nothing between them. I felt the weight of the lie pressing on me, suffocating me. The more I watched, the more I realized that I had been blind, that I had been letting her lie to me, letting myself believe that everything was okay, when it wasn't. It was becoming unbearable. I had to leave. I turned around, walking quickly to the door, trying to keep my breathing steady, trying to control the anger that was building in my chest. But as I reached the door, I stopped. I couldn't leave like this. I couldn't walk away and pretend I hadn't seen what I just saw. I needed to confront it. I needed to confront her. I turned back around, my heart pounding in my chest. I walked back to the counter, where Luca was now wiping down a glass. I stood there, my mouth dry, trying to figure out what to say, how to even begin. Luca looked up, his eyes meeting mine, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. He knew what I was there for. He had to. But instead of saying anything, I just nodded at him, my throat tight, my hands shaking. I couldn't say the words I wanted to say. I couldn't ask the questions that had been haunting me. Instead, I turned back toward the door, leaving without a word. I had to get out of there. I couldn't look at him anymore. I couldn't look at Grace anymore. I didn't go home. I couldn't. I drove around aimlessly, letting the road take me wherever it wanted. I needed time to think. I needed space. I didn't know what I was doing anymore, but I couldn't just keep pretending. I drove for hours, the sound of the engine filling the silence, but nothing could drown out the thoughts in my head. Nothing could erase the image of Grace and Luca together, laughing, touching, sharing something that was never meant to be shared with anyone but me. When I finally stopped, I was nowhere near home. I sat in the car, staring out at nothing, feeling completely lost. I didn't know what the next step was. I didn't know how to fix this, how to fix us. But the one thing I did know was this: things would never be the same again. I stayed in the car for what felt like hours, just sitting there, staring at the road, trying to make sense of everything. The truth was undeniable now, but the part that hurt the most was how much I had ignored, how many red flags I had brushed off. Grace had been slipping away for longer than I wanted to admit. I didn't know what I was supposed to do now. The anger was still there, but it was mixed with something else, something deeper. Hurt. Betrayal. I didn't know if I was more upset with her or with myself for not seeing it sooner. I finally started the car, the engine humming softly in the quiet night. I didn't have a destination in mind, but I couldn't go home. Not yet. I couldn't face her without knowing what I was going to say. The city lights blurred past as I drove, lost in thought. The streetlights flickered overhead, casting long shadows on the empty roads. I wasn't thinking about where I was going. I was thinking about the conversation we would eventually have. The conversation I had been avoiding for so long. I didn't want to admit it, but I was scared. Scared of losing her. Scared of the truth. But mostly, I was scared of facing a future where everything I thought I knew about my life had been a lie. After a while, I ended up at the cafe again. I didn't know why I kept coming back. Maybe it was because I couldn't let go of the idea that I was wrong, that I hadn't seen it for what it really was. I parked down the street, out of sight, and watched the cafe from my car. The lights were dim now, the last few patrons leaving as the night drew in. I sat there for a long time, hoping for some sign, some indication that I was wrong about everything. But it didn't come. The place was quiet. Luca was locking up, wiping down tables, and Grace's car was nowhere in sight. I didn't know why I still cared. I didn't know why I was waiting. Maybe I was hoping to catch a glimpse of them together again, to see something that would make me feel like I wasn't crazy, like I wasn't overreacting. But that hope faded the longer I sat there. Eventually, Luca finished locking up and turned to walk away. I watched him for a moment, feeling a mixture of resentment and helplessness. He had become the symbol of everything that was wrong with my marriage. But I couldn't blame him entirely. He wasn't the one who had promised me loyalty. I didn't follow him. I didn't confront him, because in the end, it wasn't him I was angry with. It was Grace. As I drove away, I realized that I wasn't just avoiding her. I was avoiding myself. Because the truth wasn't just about her betrayal. It was about what it meant for me. What it meant for the life I thought I had. And the hardest part? The hardest part was realizing that, no matter what I did next, I couldn't unsee what I had already seen. I had no idea how long I'd been driving, but by the time I made it back home, the sun was rising. I couldn't remember the last time I had stayed out that long, or the last time I had felt so detached from everything. My body felt like it was moving on autopilot, while my mind was stuck in some endless loop, replaying everything that had happened over the last few weeks. When I pulled into the driveway, Grace's car was parked in its usual spot. I hesitated for a moment before getting out. I didn't want to face her, not yet. But I couldn't keep running from it. I couldn't keep pretending I didn't know what was happening. I walked inside, and she was there, sitting at the kitchen table, sipping coffee like everything was normal. It was like I hadn't just spent the last few hours watching her and Luca together. I could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating, but she didn't seem to notice. She looked up at me, smiling, the kind of smile she always gave me when she thought everything was fine. "Where'd you go?" she asked, the question too casual. I stopped at the door, my eyes scanning her face. For a moment, I thought about lying. I thought about telling her I had gone for a drive, that I just needed some air. But I couldn't. Not anymore. "I went to the cafe," I said quietly. "I saw you." She froze, her smile faltering. It wasn't a huge reaction, but it was enough. Her eyes flicked to the side, and I could see the lie forming on her lips before she even spoke. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, but I could hear the hesitation in her voice. I took a step forward, my heart pounding in my chest. "I saw you with Luca. At the cafe. Laughing. Touching." Her face went pale. I could see the truth flash in her eyes for just a second before she regained control. "It's not what you think," she said, her voice shaky. I wanted to shout at her, to demand that she stop lying. But I didn't. I just stood there, watching her, trying to piece everything together in my mind. I could feel the walls closing in, and in that moment, I realized how much I had ignored. How much I had trusted her when I shouldn't have. I had seen the signs, but I had been afraid to admit what they meant. I had let her get away with it, thinking that if I pretended it wasn't happening, it would just go away. But it didn't go away. "Don't lie to me," I said, my voice low, but steady. "I saw you. I saw how you looked at him. How he looked at you." She looked away, and for a brief moment, I saw something in her eyes. Guilt? Shame? I couldn't tell, but it was there. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "It just happened. It wasn't supposed to." But I didn't want her apology. I didn't need her explanation. I needed answers. "Who are you?" I asked, the words coming out of my mouth before I could stop them. It wasn't a question I'd ever thought I'd ask her, but it was the only one that mattered now. She looked up at me, and I saw the truth in her eyes. "I'm someone who's lost," she said softly, almost to herself. "I don't know who I am anymore." The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. But I knew one thing. Everything had changed, and nothing would ever be the same. Her words hung in the air. "I'm lost." They weren't an apology, and they sure as hell weren't an explanation. It was just a cold confession of something I hadn't wanted to see. "Lost," I echoed, the frustration building. "So that's it. You're lost, and that's why you've been with him? That's why you've been lying to me?" She didn't respond, her gaze dropping to the floor, avoiding me. "I never meant to hurt you." The word struck me, but I couldn't control the anger anymore. "You didn't mean to?" I stepped closer, voice rising. "Does that make it okay? Does that fix everything?" Her silence only made it worse. I ran a hand through my hair, pacing as the weight of everything hit me. "I don't know who you are anymore. I don't know what happened to us." She finally looked up, her eyes glistening with tears. "I never wanted this. I was empty. And I thought maybe with Luca, it would fill something. But it didn't. It made everything worse." Empty. The word hit me harder than anything she'd said. She had been checking out long before Luca entered the picture. She had been living a lie, and I didn't see it. "I've been trying to fix something," she whispered, stepping closer, her voice breaking. I thought with him, it would be different." I couldn't believe it. "And you thought I wouldn't notice?" I shot back. "You thought I wouldn't see you change?" Her face crumpled. "I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt you." Her apology felt empty, like a shadow of what had been. "Sorry," I repeated, bitterly. "Is that supposed to make it right?" She stepped forward, but I pulled back, feeling nothing but disgust. "I didn't want to hurt you," she whispered again. "But I did. It didn't matter anymore." Her words meant nothing. The damage was done. "I don't know what to do with this," I muttered, backing away. "I don't know what to do with you." She didn't answer. She couldn't. And I couldn't look at her anymore. I left the room without looking back. I couldn't look at her anymore, not after that. The silence in the house was deafening, and I felt the weight of everything crashing down on me. I didn't know where to go, but I couldn't stay there. Not like that. I grabbed my jacket and stepped outside. The air was cold, sharp against my skin, but it was the only thing that felt real right now. Everything else, Grace, the lies, the betrayal, was a blur I couldn't make sense of. I didn't go far. I ended up at the park a few blocks away, sitting on a bench, staring at nothing. The whole world felt like it was moving in slow motion, and I couldn't keep up. I couldn't catch my breath, couldn't stop thinking about what had just happened, what she had just said. It didn't feel real, but it was. I pulled out my phone, staring at the screen, knowing I should call someone who could talk sense into me, help me figure this out. But I didn't. I couldn't bring myself to make the call. No one could fix this. I thought about Luca. I thought about how easy it had been for him to slip into our lives, how smooth he made everything look, how much he must have known. And all the while, I had trusted him. I had trusted her. It was all slipping through my fingers, and I couldn't stop it. My mind kept going back to that moment, to Grace's words. "I'm lost." Was that the truth? Was she really just searching for something she hadn't found in me? Or was that just an excuse, a way to make herself feel less guilty? I didn't know. The sun was setting by the time I stood up. I had been sitting there for hours, but I hadn't moved, hadn't thought of anything else. I didn't have answers, and I didn't know where this would go, but I couldn't stay frozen in place. Not forever. I walked back home, each step heavier than the last. I didn't know what I was walking back to, but I knew I couldn't keep running. The truth was in front of me now, and I had to face it, no matter how much it hurt. I didn't know what I expected when I walked through the door. Maybe I thought Grace would be gone, packing her things, ready to leave. Maybe I hoped for a confrontation, some kind of closure. But when I stepped inside, the house was still the same. Quiet. Empty in a way that had nothing to do with the space and everything to do with the feeling between us. She was still there, sitting on the couch, her hands folded in her lap, her face pale. She didn't look up when I came in. I didn't know what to say to her. I didn't know if I even wanted to speak. The silence between us stretched, heavy and thick. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely audible. "I never wanted to hurt you." I stared at her, trying to make sense of the words, but nothing fit. The trust, the years, everything we had it all been a lie? Or was she really lost, like she said? I can't do this, I said, my voice rough. I can't keep pretending everything's fine when I know it's not. She nodded, tears falling quietly down her cheeks. I know. I took a deep breath. It felt like the world was moving around me, and I was stuck in one place, unable to catch up. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to yell, but all I felt was numb. I don't know what happens next, I muttered, pacing the room. I don't know if I can forgive you. Grace didn't respond. She didn't have to. Her silence spoke louder than any words could. I'm not asking you to forgive me, she whispered. I just need you to know I never meant for any of this to happen. I stopped pacing. Her words didn't feel like an apology anymore. They felt like resignation, like she had already accepted the loss. I'm not sure who I am anymore, I said, my voice breaking. I thought I knew. I thought I knew you. Grace stood up, and for a moment, we just stood there, facing each other. I saw the pain in her eyes, but I couldn't tell if it was for me or for herself. I don't know if we can fix this, she said quietly. I don't know if we can go back. I nodded. I don't either. I didn't say anything after that. There was nothing left to say. The silence returned, and this time, it was the kind that stretched between us, separating us, creating a distance that couldn't be bridged. I walked out without looking back, and as I stepped out into the world that no longer felt like mine, I realized that some things can't be fixed. Some things you can never unsee. And in that moment, I knew it was over.